All right, welcome back to the Wealth Juice podcast. Today, I have on a very special guest, Adam Jason, who's the co-CEO of the Green Coffee Company. And I was just chatting with you pre-recording, we oftentimes chat with investors, real estate investors, entrepreneurs, but this episode will be focused on like building this coffee company business, which I literally have my coffee right here. So like it's a part of my everyday. And I always said to people that are like, oh, what business should I start? I don't know anything about the coffee business. So keep that as a caveat. But if you're selling something that people are generally addicted to, it's not a
Right.
bad thing. So anyway, that's just a little caveat there. But Jason, Adam, I really appreciate you coming on the show, man.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got
So
229 million Americans drinking coffee every day. So we figured there were some folks out there who would prefer ours to their
yeah,
usual brew. So we'll see.
yeah, and we'll chat about like the differentiation and why your company, why it works. But maybe let's go pre entrepreneurship, pre Green Coffee Company, and just talk to me about like what got you into the entrepreneurship business, the world. Like, how did that start for you?
Sure. So just on the business side of things, I was a capital markets attorney by trade, practiced in the US for about 8 years, two of the larger law firms there, Jones Day, Vincent and Elkins. My clients were pre-IPO companies that we took public, and then existing public companies and Wall Street banks. So we raised a lot of money on the exchanges for them. In the private capital markets, we advised boards of directors, shareholder rights, corporate governance, those kinds of things. I did that, as I mentioned, for about 8 years. And then, probably like most people find in their own career paths, you get to a fork in the road of kind of what's next. In the law firm world, the three options are basically become a partner at the law firm, go in house at one of your clients and become their general counsel or some role in their legal department, or do something totally different. And really, that fork in the road for me is something I sat on and thought about for a while. I grew up not really doing too much traveling. My kind of traveling as a native Buffalonian was maybe going across the border to Canada for a little while, or going to the Adirondacks or those kinds of things. I didn't have that experience too much growing up, but I did make it kind of something I wanted to do as I had a little bit more ability to do so. And so I spent this all kind of leads back to your initial question. I decided to spend about a month in Colombia, in Medellin, if you pronounce it in the kind of Spanish flair of the name. I spent about a month here. At that time, I was thinking about what my next steps would be. Met my now business partner, and he was getting ready to kick off the initial capital raise for the Green Coffee Company, which is our business down here in Colombia. And I said, wow, this is really unique. This is really interesting. He needed some help raising that initial capital. My experience as a securities attorney in the US was a direct correlation to that. Basically, our investors then and now are high net worth US investors. So whether you're raising money for farms in Colombia or an oil field in Texas, if you're talking to US investors, the rules of the game are the same. So I partnered up with him and kind of took that leap of faith. I've been down in Colombia since 2018, relatively on a full-time basis until the middle of last year when we opened our US headquarters in Chicago. And since then I've been going back and forth and racking up a lot of airline miles. So that's
Yeah.
the path.
Cool. No, this is great, man. So one of the questions that I have here, just in the inception of all this, is I find this fork in the road is very interesting. I'm curious what pushed you over the edge, because I think a lot of people would think, well, I've spent years going to school to become a lawyer, years being a lawyer, and then thinking like, is this fork in the road and changing paths? Am I ruining something that I've already built? Like, I'm very curious to know the decision, like how you decided, all right, I'm just going to take this leap. And like, I guess you were burnt out from the law, like field itself, maybe, or maybe not. You tell me.
For me, it was a great learning experience, and I got to be around people doing business at a really high level. As I mentioned, some of the clients I had, in the law world, I'd say my friend describes this the most accurately that I can think of is it's really a pie eating contest where the winner gets more pie. So no matter how good you are for a long time, it really takes grinding and doing more of the same. I'd say to really make a career difference where you're out pitching for a lot of new business and front and center, it probably takes you about 15 years of practice. And I just did not see myself going down the same path as the partners at the firm who were ahead of me by 5, 10 years. It just didn't seem attractive. Some really great opportunities to go in house at some exciting clients. Brown Foreman, which owns Jack Daniels, and some interesting names. We represented Yeti Coolers in their IPO, and that would have been a good opportunity to do something. But I just said, I really want like the freedom that comes with the entrepreneurial path. And then I've seen some great businesses get built. I think the challenge to do it on my own would be a welcome thing to go through in my life. And I had good, I guess, downside protection, right? Like the legal world is not going anywhere. There's some disruption now with AI and things, but at that time it was, if this doesn't work out, I can go back and maybe I'll have a cool story to tell
Yep.
as I interview for a new position. So I saw the risk as relatively low. And it was just a natural, like, let me try something new here.
Love it. I think that seems like such a real answer, and for you to just go and do it on your own, like almost for the story in a way, like, hey, this will be a cool story if it doesn't work out, and my worst case scenario is what I'm already doing, right, or in some
Right.
other capacity, right? So I
Right.
think that's great. The Before we get into green coffee and like the actual company, you mentioned going down to Colombia. Sometimes I find it so fascinating to, like, if you break out from the normal, like, everyday life, sometimes those are like when the best ideas form, or like if you should just escape your computer or your like commute, if you can do that
Yeah.
and you start to like think outside the box. Did you meet your partner on that trip, or was this someone you knew previously? Who, like, how did that actually work out, the partnership formation?
On the trip. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, it really is. And it's not, uh, Colombia's gotten a lot more attention recently for tourism things, but it's not a huge expat market, especially where people go to actually build businesses. There's a lot of folks who come and they do the digital nomad route. Work from their apartments or cafes, and there's definitely a nice arbitrage between earning in dollars and spending in Colombian pesos that people do. But it's rare to find other expats that are bringing capital in and making real investments in businesses. So it was, I don't know. So there was fate involved for sure.
So if you've ever tried getting a mortgage, which I'm sure many of you have, you know how daunting and discouraging it can be of a process. The slow process, paperwork, being told no without any real explanation. One time we were even told that taking out a home equity line of credit on an investment property wasn't even possible. So that all changed when we were introduced to Neo Home Loans. What makes Neo different is literally how they approach lending. They're not just checking the boxes, they're legit problem solvers. They look at your entire financial picture and explore multiple angles, literally until they find a strategy that works. They helped us reposition our portfolio, pull out lines of credits to scale, and structure everything for long term growth. And on top of that, their rates were some of the most competitive that we've seen. They just literally did whatever it takes to find a solution. For us, Neo has become our liability advisor, the same way you have a financial advisor on the asset side for the liabilities. If you're serious about building wealth through real estate, it's worth sitting down with them and getting your lending strategy dialed in. If you want to book a call with them, click the link in our show notes. Their team is unreal, but don't just take it from us. Find out for yourself. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it has to be in some capacity. So,
Yes.
I then what struck you about this idea about the coffee company? You said it was so interesting to you, and like I know you're kind of like a farm to cup, as you say here, farm to cup coffee company, which is really enticing for somebody who doesn't realize, like, if people don't realize like the amount of, I don't know, chemicals, and just like if you're going to Starbucks or Dunkin', like you are just like it's like anything. It's kind of like this mass produced, where the farm to cup is interesting, because if you're going to drink coffee every day, you might as well try to get the best. So what about this was intrigued you enough to be like, I could see us building this together?
Hmm. The initial genesis of the business was really demand driven from actually real estate investors, primarily located in the U.S. The Colombian market for short-term rentals, commercial real estate had probably started opening 2015, 2016, because started becoming more and more popular. That economic arbitrage, the currency arbitrage I mentioned to you, and also just a new market that was kind of on people's radar became interesting. And so we had a group of investors that we were previously familiar with who had already deployed capital into commercial real estate, short term real estate opportunities. And they said, we'd really like to do something that lives and breathes and feels like real estate, but that's a little bit differently. We don't want another Airbnb property or something of the sort. So we said, okay, well, what is a real estate like asset that US based investors would be familiar and comfortable with? We grew up in the US. I'm 40. We grew up in the US with a lot of marketing around Colombian coffee as a premium, a lot of familiarity with the Juan Valdez coffee brand, all the commercials, movie references that we saw growing up. So coffee in Colombia had a synonymous position in a lot of minds of investors. We saw a good opportunity in the market to acquire farms, do some deals to start consolidating some land, building some new infrastructure. The market here, it's may come as a surprise a little bit, but the names that you mentioned, the Dunkins, the Starbucks, those folks, they don't go down to origin and farm their own coffee. By the time they get the coffee into their production line, it's already gone through many hands. They often buy from intermediaries. Uh, they're not here competing with us per se.
Multiple companies wholesaling coffee in a way. Is what you're saying.
Absolutely,
Yeah. Okay.
absolutely. So we saw a lot of generational turnover in farming here. We could talk about the ins and outs of the industry if you think it would be interesting and how deals kind of come together. But it was just okay, we have this demand from investors. This is an idea. Colombian coffee is not so far afield from what people can wrap their heads around, and we see a big opportunity to do something interesting where nobody else is, and just started to run with it. Saw things evolve on a day-to-day basis. The opportunity became bigger and bigger as we went through it. And right now, we're the largest producer of coffee in the country. About 10 million coffee trees, 10,000 acres. It's a big operation.
So your distribution, I know that you mentioned you just opened up in the United States in terms of your headquarters or a headquarters in Chicago. Is
Yes.
is your distribution mainly in Colombia? Is it in the like? And I'm just saying this from somebody who has not heard of the brand. Is your goal to grow more in the United States? And I might not have just heard of it just because, but like, what's your position now? Is it like mostly in Colombia and then growing in the U.S.?
Yeah, so we do everything, as you mentioned, from farm to cup. So we have our own nursery where we germinate the seeds and take all the plants up into the mountains and plant them and tend them and grow the coffee, process it, etc. We export it to the US. And then we have basically two lines of business. One is our wholesale private label food service piece of the business, where we use our green coffee company name to go after and support clients such as hotels, restaurants, casinos. The U.S. national parks is a big client of ours. The 6 Western national parks use our coffee throughout their operations. The UFC, Chicago Cubs, LA Rams, pretty substantial names. They all see a connection between the story that they want to tell to their consumers and then what we do at origin here in Colombia from a farming perspective, whether it's regenerative agriculture, carbon positive farming, traceability through the supply chain. That's one thing that these bigger names, Starbucks and Dunkin', can't provide because of all the different hands that touch the coffee before they get it. And then probably for your older listeners and let's call it the 40 and above and the Hispanic audience, we hold the exclusive rights in the US to the Juan Valdez coffee brand. So we have a large branded piece of the business as well. We're in about 2,500 doors. We started selling into the US market just over a year ago, and we've opened up distribution through Target, Walgreens, some of the household names that you would know there. So there's really
Yeah.
two sides of the business.
Very cool. So Adam, the because you're a co-CEO, and based on your background, it seems to me that, like, are you more of the sales, marketing, capital relations arm of the business, and then your partner does more of the operations? Can you talk about the how you guys like split duties, and then like what you oversee versus what he does?
Sure. We actually divided by geography.
Oh, okay, cool.
So I've been leading our US efforts. US team consists of our sales team and logistics. And then everything in Colombia is ops based and farming based. So
Got it.
we've done it that way. On the investor front, we pair up, serve as kind of the dual face of the company. But in terms of the day to day oversight, we divide and conquer based on geography. The only reason I'm not in Chicago all the time is because I have a wife and daughter here in Colombia, and we're still navigating some of the immigration challenges
Got it. Okay.
that are out there. So, yeah, that's why all the frequent flying.
Okay, very cool. So you really your trip to Colombia was really really a big trip. It was not
There,
just yeah. So
it
I
was an
want to talk.
investment.
Yeah, totally. So
Yeah,
I want to talk about what it's like to grow a company as fast as you have. I mean, you became the biggest coffee producer in Colombia's biggest in under 5 years, and it's like, when I think about this, I think about, man, hiring a staff and operations and running a team and grow, like all of these things. I'm curious on like how what you've learned, maybe like what your day to day looks like at this stage. Like, is it sure it's jam packed, but if you could just talk to me about like what it's been like to scale and some of the things that you've put into place to allow you to do that.
sure. Well, it hasn't been without its challenges, that's for sure. Definitely mistakes and learning lessons and all of those things that come with building a business and building a business in a new market. Not Colombian, nor is my business partner. We had to find the right team who understands the market, understands the culture, just learning the language and being able to have conversations with banks and stakeholders in Spanish. Right, that takes some time. It's a unique market. Things don't operate at the same, I'd say, level of efficiency or capitalistic tendencies that we would see in the US. Things take a little slower, or take a little bit more time. The initial acquisitions that we did, and really all the acquisitions, but you're dealing with family businesses. The typical deal will be 50 years ago, great grandpa starts a farm. He lives next to his brothers, sisters, their families. They consolidate some land, turn it into a relatively large farming operation, and then it gets passed down through the generations. It gets, let's say, third or fourth generation of that farm, and at that point, actually, you have some decent wealth tied up in the farm itself, but really no access to. You don't just go to Citibank and say, "Hey, I want to refi this property," right? Really, you have to basically sell it to get any liquidity. So you'll find these third and fourth generation farming families. Somebody wants to go to Paris or Miami or New York and study or do something. So that's where the opportunity became for us to tap into these different acquisitions. But negotiating one of those deals is not. I call my real estate agent that you know, whatever Hunt or whoever the real estate. This is like you're talking to 11 family members, each of whom owns some varying percentage of the farm. All of them have different points of view, and it's a challenge. So navigating those things and then figuring out gaps and weaknesses and what talent we need to bring in. I mean, that was really the first couple of years of the business. My number one priority basically is bringing in the best possible talent that we can on both sides of the business in Colombia and then in the US. Um, that's where I spend a lot of my time. Our capital raising efforts and then talent and recruiting and making sure our employees are happy and motivated to do a great job for us.
Love it. I think it's great. It seems like your business model for investors is like people that are skeptical of Wall Street or thinking like, I'm not sure. Like, for example, we're having this conversation. It's the end of March. This podcast episode probably won't be released for a few weeks, so who knows what the market could look like? It's very seems volatile right now, but we're
Right.
down 10% in the last 3 to 6 months. The Mag 7, like there's just like a lot of uncertainty, war in Iran, all this
Mhm.
stuff, right? So to me, it's almost like, when is there not uncertainty? That's how I look at this. It seems like there always is, but the market's responding right now.
Right.
So those who are skeptical of Wall Street and people who are looking for like more off market or alternative opportunities, it sounds like that's where you kind of thrive a little bit. So I'm curious, from an investor's perspective, like, how do you show investors how this is a great way for them to potentially get better returns than they could get just investing in the 401k or et cetera?
Right. Well, the pool, if you're a Wall Street investor investing in the stock markets, the pool of investments has really slimmed over the years. So we're actually down to only about 2,500 public companies. When you start adding in analysts and all the attention and capital that goes to those companies, the chance of any of us finding a diamond in the rough is pretty slim. So things are pretty much picked over. There's obviously a lot of disruption with AI today. I think it's going to have an impact on many businesses. I think our business is not free of or immune to macroeconomic challenges. For example, the situation in Iran right now and the impact that that's likely to have on fertilizers is a challenge that we're trying to navigate through in our own business. But like you said in the beginning, coffee's not going anywhere. We've got 229 million people in the US alone who drink coffee every day. I don't think AI is going to have some kind of major impact on that. Even we've seen the impacts of inflation and those factors. People continue to reach for their coffee every day, right? So we feel pretty good about that from a business standpoint. And then on the investment side, just given my experience and understanding what investors like, we've structured everything as a U.S. company. So it gives you access to kind of, let's say, foreign assets along with U.S. downstream growth into some of the clients that I mentioned. And then our goal is to try and reach the public markets in the U.S. in the next 18 to 24 months. We're targeting trying to get investors liquidity in a relatively near term fashion and bring some additional money into the business. I think for most investors, they're not getting a lot of, let's call it, pre or soon to be pre IPO opportunities. Those tend to go to preferred insiders, and it's not usually open to, let's call it, everyday investors. We're trying to do things a little bit differently and work with that group of investors and do something special for them when they're often, let's say, left out of the bigger opportunities.
Hey, let me pause the episode real quick. Let me know if this sounds like you. You're making six figures, you're climbing the corporate ladder, investing in your 401k and your Roth IRA, and maybe even a brokerage account. But deep down, you're asking yourself, is this really it? Like, am I just going to do this thing for the next 30 years and hope to retire in my 60s? That was exactly us just a few years back. We were curious and excited about real estate, but overwhelmed and without a roadmap. If you fast forward to today, we've built a portfolio of over 80 cash flowing units and grown our net worth to over $2 million. We made it our mission to help busy professionals like you take that same leap and start building generational wealth for yourself and your family. That's exactly why we created the Wealth Juice Inner Circle, a private real estate investing community designed to help you get your first rental property under your belt in as little as 90 days. Inside, you'll get direct access to us, our full investing network, private off-market deals, and our exact playbook, and a community of investors who are closing deals every single week. That first property changed everything for us. We always talk about it. It was the true foundation for building generational wealth. And honestly, if we had access to something like this when we first started, we'd be 10 times further along by now. So if this sounds just like you, click the link in our show notes and schedule a call with me. Yes, me. I'll be taking the calls. We'll go over your goals, map out a plan, and get you ready to close your first deal. Let's get it. Yeah. So as an example, like, our when we raise capital for our properties, because we raise capital for like mid-sized multifamily, like our general rule of thumb is like, hey, if we can get you double digit returns, 16 to 17% IRR, and then double your money in the time frame that we hold the project, whether that's 5 years ish, that's a good deal for you call it
Hmm.
vanilla, but that's a good deal for us. It seems like there's on this, and I'm a little wet behind the ears when I talk about this type of investing. So from a passive investment standpoint, I know you're not promising anything, but in terms of projections, like it seems like there's higher upside with a company like yours. Are you able to chat numbers on like what that looks like, or what the goal is, at least, of just like what you'd say, hey, if you're looking for potentially higher upside as an investor, this is what we're looking at.
Yeah, we're going out for some capital right now. Our projections, we're looking at like 3 to 4 time equity multiple on our investment on new capital coming in. You're right; it probably has a little bit more upside just because there's not as much ceiling as you might have with a piece of real estate. Things can kind of get crazy when you're looking at public market opportunities. So we also understand the there has to be that potential for investors to get interested in something that does have a little bit different taste, right? There's the Colombian piece of the business that people are not always as familiar with. Um, so we try to maintain a valuation and upside potential that would be significant enough for people to do that. Let's call it risk reward analysis.
Totally curious on what success would look like for your company. Like, what is there if you had a crystal ball, 5 years, 8 years, 10 years down the line, this is where we'd want to get to. This is what our North Star is that we're reaching for. What would that look like if you could paint it out?
I think we could take a meaningful share of the coffee market in the US. There's right now nobody owns Colombian coffee in the mind of the consumer. But if you look at the statistics, when US shoppers go to the grocery store, if they're faced with all the single origin options, so you can buy a bag of Colombian, you can buy a bag of Guatemalan, you can buy a bag of Honduran, Brazilian, Hawaiian, what have you, 70% of the time, customers choose Colombian because of that premium positioning that's been around for really a number of decades. But there's no brand where you say, oh, yeah, Folgers owns Colombian coffee or Starbucks owns Colombian. It's impossible, right? Even like the Maxwell houses and these other names, they'll have a Colombian, but it'll be right next to the blueberry muffin or whatever. They don't have that control over what's really a premium category. I think as we continue to get our name out there, we'll get a lot of that traction in the B2B wholesale space. But then also the Juan Valdez brand has a 28% market awareness among consumers. That one has the most potential to own, in our minds, that Colombian coffee category, which makes up a meaningful piece of the market. So to me, that would be very satisfying. That would also enable us to expand our farming operations in Colombia. We also buy coffee from about 1,300 smaller coffee growers. They're an important piece of our production pipeline. As we drive up more on the demand side, it'll give us a chance to expand the supply and do more impactful things here. So, quite honestly, I'm just looking to have some fun, grow the sales, beat out some of the names that are familiar to people, which we're already doing, and win some business there. Compete, do some interesting things for our employees, take care of our investors, and hopefully make it an enjoyable an enjoyable experience.
I think a lot of people forget how much business and sports like parallel. Like sometimes it's just
Oh yeah.
for the love of competing, like just because I find that interesting too because I don't think I have like this ultimate goal. Like I've tried to create ultimate goals with my business, but I'm also like, man, I love just like figuring it out almost. Some days I like figuring out more than others.
Right.
Some, but it's just like the competition that just drives you. And like if you can have fun doing it, I think that goes a lot, a really long way. I'm
Yes.
curious about the maybe the why behind what you're doing now. You know, you've been in law for such a long time. Now are doing this new venture. It seems like you're having fun. Like, but I know that there are trials and tribulations and things that happen that have been probably really difficult without even asking you the question, just knowing what business owners go through. So I'm curious, like the overarching, like what gets you out of bed every morning? Like what's the driving force? And like if you and sometimes I like to dive a little bit deeper into like the psychology behind it because I think that helps me people like learn about you a little bit more.
Right. Well, some days you're right. Or some days are easier than others. Some days are tougher than others. Fundamentally, we set a mission, right? We said this is what we're going to do. We're going to create this business. We brought in a lot of investor capital, about over $100 million, and that's not just from nameless faces. It's family members, our own money. Like my business partner and I have put everything we have into this. My wife's family, there's a lot of people that we have an obligation to. So yeah, some days, the motivation is not exactly there, but we have a mission. It comes down to discipline. And then other days, and the majority of days are like, look, this is really fun. We're taking, we're competing with big names for real business. And we just last week we got the award letter from Walgreens. We got our first purchase order from Carnival Cruises to be the coffee for their cruise ships. These are names that, like, it's not an ego thing. It's just we grew up with these names. We've known them forever. It's pretty cool to say,
Yeah.
yeah, we're the coffee for them in a business that we didn't start too long ago and that we kind of built from scratch. It's pretty fun to see the story and the belief that we had validated with some of these names coming on board. And then honestly, I just continue to learn, like this role in the US, leading the sales and logistics teams. We've hired fantastic people. They've been in, a lot of them are 15 years older than I am. So it's an interesting time in my own professional development of how do you lead a team where people frankly have a lot more industry knowledge than I do, have a lot more experience than I do, but I'm the one with the leadership hat on. So it's a fun, the challenges within the challenges, I guess, of doing these things. Every day poses a different problem to solve or unique experience to pounce on.
Yeah, I love it, man. I think you mentioned like high net worth individuals, and you've raised capital from over $100 million. Now it seems like there's an opportunity for quote unquote everyday investors to get involved. So are you able to like 506c accredited investors with the 300K combined net worth or the combined income plus a million net worth? Is that who you're looking to raise capital from at this stage?
Yeah, actually, right now we're talking to some development finance institutions and some impact investors that are, let's call it, more institutionally based. But we would be interested in welcoming more individual investors if they were interested. So we're going to raise probably 20 to 25 million dollars. Anything that comes in on the individual side would reduce the amount that we need to raise from the institution. So it's kind of whoever comes in first, we'd be happy to take along on the journey with us.
Love it, man. Well, Adam, this is cool. I like talking about alternative assets and just there's I always say this. There's so many ways to make money in this world. It just you know to me it's like just such an interesting business, and it's like also intrigued by people that kind of take a shot of something that they change after they've been doing it for X amount of years. I think that's such a cool
Sure.
thing, and not everyone can do it. A lot of people will stay miserable just because they're comfortable. And when I say comfortable, I just mean like they have a salary that allows them to live a certain lifestyle. And I know as a
Right.
lawyer, like obviously you get paid a decent amount, right? And I'm sure you
Right.
were. So that to me is exciting. Like there has to be some excitement. I think when we're children, we're excited about everything, and then when we become adults, we're like, well, I guess this is just the way it's going to be. And sometimes that I always like to chat with people who like broke out of that, even if I'm sure the first couple years were like, damn, like I'm not making what I used to. I don't know what that was like for you, but for me, I had to take a step back to go full time into this financially.
Mhm.
And I thought, well, that hockey stick is there, that's coming, but it doesn't happen right away. And I think that's, you only got one of these things, so you might as well take the shot. And that's, I don't
For
know if you
sure.
have anything to add on to that, but I enjoy these types of combos.
I probably had a little bit more like internal, I don't know if it's pain or what it's the right word, but a little bit more of an internal, like, I just really don't want to go down the path of of the other partners and folks that I see where I just had enough, let's call it pain for lack of a better word, to try and do something a little bit different. I imagine there's a lot of people that are kind of floating between, yeah, it's not so good, it's not so bad. Like I'll just kind of stay here. But I think your point is right. Like you really only get, one shot at what life's gonna look like. So if you can do it and you really want to, be committed. It's not easy. Um, I would encourage people to go for it. And you do like what we did and we talked about before. It's like what's the worst case scenario? I can't speak for everybody. At the time, I didn't have a family. I didn't have a whole level of commitment that keeps people where they are. Sometimes it's an individual circumstance that you have to analyze on your own, but it's definitely possible. Or start slow. Do
Yeah.
something in your free time. Let it build. Like, don't make a huge jump right away. Like, there's you could be strategic.
Yeah. I think a good exercise that you kind of illustrated by sharing this was just that if you could just look at the people who are a few steps ahead of you in the company that you're at, or the next
Mm,
level, or the level beyond them, if you're in corporate, if you could just look at I wouldn't encourage people to look at their money unless you're really only motivated by that, but look at their life. Do I want
right,
that life? Like, do I want
for sure.
I know people personally who work for like Goldman Sachs or something of that nature, and I mean, they make a ton of money, and then they look at the person who's stages ahead of them, and that they're 49 and working 100 hours a week, and yeah, they might have the money to feel like they can do what they want, but they actually don't have the time to do any of that, and it's
Hmm.
like just this internal struggle. So I think whether you're in corporate or not, just look at the people ahead of you and just decide, do I want that life? And then that will help you allow you and like really honestly assess that, not just the money, because
Right.
obviously if you can double your salary in the next position, like it's enticing, but how quickly does 6 months or a year go by? You just like you wake up, and so
Yeah,
time is, and anyway, it's the most valuable resource in my opinion,
it
and
is.
I'd rather make less money and enjoy my journey a little bit more. That's just my
Right.
my take.
Or like
So
you said, there's
yeah.
that J curve, right? Like maybe it's a little bit less money for a lot more later. I'm not, I say this kind of, I'm not really that money driven. So it doesn't make that much of a, I'd rather enjoy myself and make less than make a bunch and not be happy or
I
have
love
the time to spend it. So,
I love it. Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
it's a great point. So, Adam, this has been awesome, man. If people want to learn more about you, they want to follow your journey. Maybe we have some people that are listening. They're like, I would love to. This sounds like a great opportunity for me to potentially get involved on an individual level. What's the best way for people to connect with you or get in touch with you?
I think the best way is on LinkedIn. If you find me through there, we can connect. If you're interested in seeing the investment materials, I can share it through the platform and set you up with our investor relations team. And then if you just want to learn more about the business generally, it's greencoffeecompany.com.
Love it, Adam. This has been awesome, man. Thank you so much for taking the time today. I really think this is a valuable lesson, valuable story, and I love learning more about Green Coffee Company.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Before we wrap this show up, I want to leave you with this. If you're listening to the show, chances are you're doing pretty well in your career. You're making maybe six figures. You're putting money into your retirement accounts, maybe stacking some cash in a brokerage account, but you're still waiting for that next level. And here's the truth: waiting just costs you time. Every month you're on the sidelines is another month you could have had a property paying you and another step closer to financial freedom that you didn't take. Ryan and I know this because we stayed on the sidelines too long. We talk about this sometimes. We had the money, but not the guidance. And once we finally got our first property, everything shifted. It was the catalyst that built our entire portfolio and ultimately gave us freedom. And that's exactly why we built the Wealth Juice Inner Circle, to cut out wasted time, just give you the exact blueprint and surround you with a network of people who are closing deals every single week. So if you're tired of waiting and you're ready to finally get your first deal, click the link in the show notes and schedule a call with me. Let's map out your strategy and get you moving before another year slips by.